Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest in the ChemCareers series of webinars for this year. My name's Julie Franklin and I'm one of the Career and Professional Development Advisors at the RSC, and I'd like to introduce my colleague Gareth Davies, who is a Membership Development and Recruitment Specialist. Would you like to say hello, Gareth?
Hi all, thank you for the introduction, Julie. As my title indicates, my role at the RSC usually is around supporting members into the RSC, as well as helping engage with their membership throughout their time with us. So today's going to be a bit unusual for me, talking a little bit less about the RSC and a little bit more about one of the partners that we have. But hopefully this will be useful for all of you over the next few months and years as you progress in your careers. So with that, should we make a start?
I think we should.
Yeah. All right, so let's move this on. There we go. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a background to our relationship with the Chartered Management Institute, which I think will give some context on the Chartered Manager Award, which you're all here to listen to. So the RSC, as most of you will know, has a long history of support and professional development, and we frequently run our member survey, and then in our most recent member survey, we acknowledged there was a gap in support for our members who moved through their careers to a stage where they might be doing slightly less chemistry, but are now managing projects or change or people within their organization, often because they have excelled in their previous roles. And the CMI has a nice phrase for this, accidental managers, and I think it's a nice phrase to sort of describe the types of people who move into these roles. It's certainly not to say they are not effective managers, but I think it does go some way to identify how they got there. And I think in our industry in particular, you see a lot of people who are fantastic chemists, fantastic chemical scientists, achieve progression because of that. And we really wanted something to demonstrate their specialism in management as well as their specialism in the chemical sciences. With that in mind, we looked to see where we might be able to give some recognition, and we immediately recognized that the CMI might be the most suitable partner for this. The only chartered body committed to excellence in management and leadership, and they've been doing that for over 60 years. So yes, this partnership was really there to help you demonstrate your high level of competence. I'll just go into the CMI a little bit more. So as I said, they are the only UK chartered body. They've been working in this area for 60 years. They have a membership of over 100,000 members, and this gave us real confidence that they could, work with us on a comparable scale. And their vision is to ensure better led and managed organisations. And I think, our sector has some of the largest organisations, both in an academic and an industrial space. So it felt very fitting, really, that we work with them. They're committed to increasing the number and standard of professional qualified managers, and for those reasons, it was certainly appropriate to get their expert support and guidance for our community. So a little bit of focus then on what today is about, and that's the Chartered Manager Award. So the CMI underpins Chartered Manager with 4 key areas that really need to be met to ensure that anyone applying for it meets their standards. And for those of you who have CChem, you might recognize some of these to a lesser or greater extent as comparable. So firstly, it's qualification. So the CMI usually look for degree level management qualifications or above, plus 3 years management experience. Now, as part of this partnership with the CMI, and this is a really critical part of this process, from the Royal Society of Chemistry members, we worked with them to map chartered chemists to meet this qualification criteria. So if you are a member of the RSC and you are a chartered chemist holder, you do not need to meet the other degree level management qualification. The CChem award has been mapped to ensure that it is commensurate. Secondly, there's competence. So alongside that qualification, it is evidence of consistently giving effective performance. You may be given examples of workplace achievements and why they are important for your organization. Evidence of targets, performance improvements. The CMI aren't looking for an exhaustive list, but want to understand the context of your role and what achievement looks like for you. Again, similar to the RSC, there's a focus on professional standards, and anyone who achieves Chartered Manager needs to be committed to the Chartered Management Institute Professional Code of Conduct. which ensures you have an ethical management approach and that you are demonstrating it throughout your role. And then that you're also maintaining your standards and your capability. And part of the award focuses on generating a CPD plan and how you will review it as you go forward. Obviously, this process starts with recent learning, but it has to demonstrate a commitment to growing your strengths on an ongoing basis. And it's a worthwhile point to mention that anyone who achieves the Chartered Manager Award, there is a sampling process for ensuring standards are maintained on an ongoing basis. So you may be selected to provide further information after you've achieved the award to show how you've continued to achieve that CPD plan that you draw up as part of the process. And the whole application process in general then is focused on demonstrating performance and achievement in the core areas of leading people, leading projects, and managing change within your organization. So I'm going to go a little more depth into the specific RSC route that is now available for you as chartered members. So as I've touched upon already, to be eligible for the qualified route, you must be an RSC member or fellow. You must hold chartered chemist status. You must have a minimum of 5 years management experience. Now, this can be managing people, this can be managing projects or change. You do not need to have a title of manager. It's not focused on that, but demonstrating the skills that a manager would need to be able to have an impact on their organization. As part of the process, you will also be required to become a CMI member or a CMI fellow. You have multiple options through this route as to how you progress, and we'll go into those in some depth, but the two available options are a written submission, which is then confirmed via telephone interview, or a professional discussion over a number of weeks. The main difference between those is that there's a difference in the amount of work for either you or your respective assessor. So they're there to support you depending on your other time commitments and priorities. The process of registering, I'll just touch upon that first. So if you want any further information after the webinar, we have a dedicated page at rsc.li/CMgr, and there you can get all the information on the RSC CMI partnership. But you can also register there and gain access to the CMI portal. And that, as I say, that is a dedicated portal for the RSE CMI route. We ask for a little bit of personal information, or the CMI asks for a little bit of personal information to start your process, and that includes your RSE member number, so that they're able to link that back to your membership with the Royal Society of Chemistry. And it's at that point that you select your assessment type. So I'll go into the written submission first, which I think is a good place to start. The purpose of this is to provide you with an opportunity to draft a written submission. There is guidance available by the Chartered Manager Institute, so you are given a steer on where there should be a focus within your submission and what areas should be drawn out, and it should be reflecting recent achievements, and it shouldn't be any further back than 18 months ago. They want to see how your management skills are applied to realize the achievements you've made, and also quite importantly is how you reflect on your achievements and how you perhaps could have approached things differently. After that initial draft submission is sent to the CMI, you'll be assigned an assessor, and they will review your submission. They'll give you prompts for more detail if they think there's areas that you could go into greater depth, or if they feel there's anything missing. And they're looking to reach a point with you where a telephone interview would be appropriate. The same assessor will then have this interview, and they want to bring your submission to life. They want to give you an opportunity for you to own your achievements and the impact they've had on their organization, and really add colour to this written submission that you've already provided. At that stage, you'll be asked to recommend a corroborator, and the assessor will contact them so that they can validate your work and your contribution. The draft process itself typically takes about 10 hours. That's a consideration to have in advance of applying. And we usually, the whole process of this usually takes about 1 to 3 months, give or take. You can see some costs on the screen there. So we have options in terms of your seniority. So there's Chartered Manager and Chartered Fellow. I will highlight for Chartered Fellow, usually you'd be looking at 10 years of management experience plus 3 years specifically focused on the strategic direction of your company. And Chartered Member I've already touched upon with the other criteria for the scheme. They're the only major differences in that is the price, but I will highlight that there's the 50% discounted membership fee for RSE members. So to retain that fee, you do have to retain your RSE membership as well as your CMI membership, but you can see the cost on screen there. Now the alternative option is a professional discussion. So the outcomes should be broadly the same, but the process is quite considerably different. So with a similar guidance that you'll receive on what the CMI are looking for, you would put together a bullet point list and submit that to the CMI, and that will cover a few areas which again I'll talk about in a moment. At that stage, the assessor will then organize a series of calls, 3 to 4 calls, to allow you the opportunity to provide that detail verbally rather than written. At that stage, the assessor will then write up a submission on your behalf. So essentially taking a lot of the written time constraint away from yourselves. You'll be sent a finalized report for any purpose you might want to use it for otherwise, but then that report is what will be sent for corroboration again by an individual that you have selected to speak or to focus on your behalf. Obviously, the benefit of this, it can be fit to your diary and your schedule, and it's also a good opportunity if you perhaps are someone who prefers to present yourself verbally rather than in written form. There is a separate set of costs for this, as you can imagine. It's a little more costly on the assessment fee, but it takes into account the time that the assessor has to commit to providing that submission on your behalf. And again, similar sort of time frame on this because of the nature of having to arrange those calls and get that set up. So to give you a little bit of insight then on what the submission should look like. So the CMI split it down into 7 sections, and really it's there to help highlight to the assessor the context of your role and how it impacts your work and organisation. So that section 1 really is about focusing on your main responsibilities and where they fit within the context of the organisation. It gives bear in mind the assessor will know nothing about you in advance, so it gives them an understanding of the starting point of the whole submission. So it's a way to present yourself initially. Section 2, what value have you added and how has this been measured? So this, as I've mentioned a few times now, is all about achievements. This should be focused on the outcomes you've achieved in the last 18 months, the influence that you have had on the performance of your organisation. A lot of people start here with the things they're most proud of, and we would recommend that you hone in on 1 or 2 examples just not to overcomplicate the process. Try and keep it focused and describe how you've achieved things in as measurable a way as possible. Depending on your role, there might be a variety of achievements you might want to focus on. That could be beneficial change. It might be some process of innovation that you've helped deliver. It might be savings or performance improvements. That doesn't matter. The focus is on your impact within that. I'm sure I'm going to bring Julie into the conversation slightly here. I'm sure that you have a number of people that you speak to in your consultations that often are trying to demonstrate ways in which they can present that impact they've had on their organisation. Is there any tips you might consider at this point?
I think, yes, you're absolutely right, there are. And I think the trap that a lot of people fall into, and listening to you talk, Gareth, I can see how it comes about, really. A lot of people very much undervalue their skills, and they don't sell themselves. Now, I know generally, as RSC members, which I would say Gareth and I both are, don't find it very easy to actually, blow their own trumpet and do all those things that they were told they shouldn't do, those who ask don't get, etc. Well, I would say this is a time, and I think if you go through a process like this, be honest about what you have actually added to things at work. Don't just think because you do something well, everybody else can do it, because they can't. So this kind of process does give you a chance to really reflect on how your own skills have developed over the last, this is 5 years management experience. So, you know, a good tip is to go back and think about how you were 5 years ago when you first took on a management role, what you could do then, and what you can do now. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll really be surprised at how far you've come. And don't take anything for granted. Anything that you do well should go in there that's relevant. And don't be afraid to say you're good at things. If there's evidence to back up the fact that you're good at them, then that's just an assertive statement. That's not blowing your own trumpet at all. Gareth made a very, very strong point in that, saying that this assessor doesn't know you. So don't leave anything to chance. If there's something you do, something you've done, don't just think, oh, well, they'll know I do that. No, you have to tell them that you do it, and preferably give them an output. That's the best way to demonstrate. So rather than saying I'm really good at this, give them an example of that demonstrates your skill, and with an outcome, what happened as a result of that. And then that makes quite a powerful submission and helps you to evaluate your own skills and realise where your strengths really lie.
Certainly. That's great. Thank you, Julie. I think it's worth mentioning, on a similar vein, I've been involved in a few discussions around chartered chemist applications recently, and a lot of the assessors there have real difficulty identifying what the individual did as well as relation to the team. We're in a community where we do so much teamwork and collaboration, and it is important in these things that you do highlight what you did and your impact. And I think that just, I say, if you can focus in the way you've said, Julie, that can help draw that out as well.
Yes, I think it can.
Yeah. Cool. So then on to section 3 and 4, I'm going to group together. So how have you used leadership skills to bring about that value? And how have you used managing change skills to bring about that value? So this is referring back to the achievements you've already touched upon. And what you want to do here is just to, in the context of those two areas, explain what you did, how you did it, why you did it, what the benefits have been, and threaded throughout all of that, focusing back to that ethical approach that we talked about on the earlier slides as well, focusing on the professional standards, the code of conduct that you would be needing to adhere to at this stage. Section 5, reflection. So I often find this is the most important part of any of these processes. What have you learned from your experience? When people, and again, I'm speaking around my own personal experience of Chartered Chemist Award here, when completing it, regardless of what my reason for starting that award, it was very much reflecting on my achievement over those few years that I found the real benefit from. So take the opportunity to determine what you're glad that you did and why, what you think you might have could have done differently and why, what do you wish you had achieved, and it helps highlight new skills and knowledge that you've developed, and what you might need to continue to develop. But also, when identifying those things that went well, it's things that you can replicate going forward and really support your management in the future.
If I could just come in there as well, Gareth, I think that's a really important thing. Reflective time, reflective headspace is something that very few of us have. It's very difficult, and I think when you're a normal busy person, you've got your work going on, you've got the rest of your life going on, when do you ever take time to actually sit and think in a quality way about yourself? We never do it, do we? No. Sometimes this can act as a bit of a catalyst to help you understand your own development. And when you're thinking about learning from your experiences, don't just make it a list of new software that you can use or new industrial processes that you're aware of. It is about that. Obviously, that's part of your technical learning, but it's also about how far you've come as a person. And it's that sort of quality experience that I think a submission like this will be looking for. Yeah.
I think this draws out a lot of the soft skills as well.
Oh,
those transferable skills.
Yeah, transferable skills.
Sometimes are hard to pin down, and maybe this is a framework to do it with.
Yeah.
Section 6, what is on your managerial professional development for the future and why? So this is, as I mentioned earlier on, it's around that personal development plan. What are your steps going forward? What is the time frame that you're going to achieve them in, to give you real confident steps to progress, so that when you achieve that award, it's not the end of the road, it's actually the beginning, and that you continue to develop going forward. And then section 7, as I touched upon slightly already, who can corroborate the detail you've provided and provide a slightly different perspective to the one you have given, confirming your achievements, but also giving the assessor just an extra flavour of of the impact that you've had. So, and I'm sure everyone would have someone in mind that would be a champion for them in that way. I'm going to move on to one of our members who's already achieved this award that we interviewed earlier this year. And I think, in fact, he was our very first member through this process. If you want to see the full interview that we had with Dr. Paul Wallace from Sensient, you can find the link at the bottom there, or go to the news pages on rse.org. But I think it's worth just looking at the quote that he's got there. I'm learning more now than ever. I don't often show a lack of confidence, but it can be there inside anyone. All those qualifications have helped to give me more confidence, and I'd say define my ability to go into discussions with colleagues, internally or externally, with greater confidence and belief in myself and my skills. And I think that really epitomizes for me CPD in general, but particularly having that recognition from a formal body. We have, that I think it's worth recognizing that reflection is an important part of that, having that opportunity. But there are other benefits as well for it. The opportunity to enhance your own personal reputation, supporting career prospects and your personal development, making you more visible. Just going through the process of this might make you more visible in your own organization, or differentiate you if you're looking to progress in some way. And as I said a moment ago, it focuses on transferable skills so that it's successes you can replicate in other roles, other organizations, or other departments. And then for your organization, it can demonstrate, the organization's impact in a competitive market if it has a number of its staff holding these chartered awards. It can support talent management, succession planning, and that as an organization, you're underpinning an ethical approach to the work that you do. So that is what we had in a nutshell. I'm going to throw it open to the floor if there are any questions. But hopefully that was helpful for you all to get a picture of what the next steps might be if you are interested in taking Chartered Manager forward. We'll just wait for some questions to come in.
Okay, could I just ask a couple of questions myself there, Gareth? I mean, a lot of people who are listening would be thinking about chartered chemist as well as chartered manager. Do the two map onto one another? Is there overlap between the competencies? I'm just very aware of the fact that people are going to be very, very busy.
Yeah.
And you maybe want both of these designations and
Absolutely.
want to know how they fit together.
Yeah. So as I touched upon, to achieve the Chartered Manager Award via this route, you have to hold Chartered Chemist.
Alright.
And the reason that exists is because we've done that mapping work. So from that, yes, you can see that there are clear overlaps in those areas. If I touch back to the submission that I mentioned before, managing and influencing is going to be features of both that are critical. Being able to communicate well are features of both Chartered Chemist and Chartered Manager that are going to be key to a successful successful application. That's to say you don't need to have, let me rephrase this. It doesn't mean that you need to have the CChem completed right now if you're not a holder, okay. But you could start that first and then on completion of that move towards Chartered Manager. But if you were only looking at the Chartered Manager Award, I would recommend speaking to the CMI directly because they do have other routes. Some of those are linked on qualifications, as I mentioned, the degree experience, but they also have experiential routes. So it might be that you're eligible for one of their other routes and there's no need to go through the RSE scheme necessarily. But yeah, there are certainly overlaps in terms of the competencies required and the things you would want to demonstrate as part of the processes.
Yeah, well, I guess that must be the case. If you're a professional in any field, there are professional standards. We have started to get some questions coming in here now, so I'm going to put those questions to Gareth. The first one says, can you have multiple corroborator sources of experience over multiple companies?
So to my understanding, the CMI request a corroborator. Now, my experience of them are that they are very willing to be flexible to support you as you feel would be best. But if I reflect again to our own processes, I would recommend choosing a person who would best articulate in your favor. We normally would recommend your current line manager. However, if you are the most senior person at your organization, by all means, a peer or someone who works with you would be suitable. And it's worth mentioning at this point, the CMI doesn't share your submission with the corroborator, although you may choose to. So they are really there to give that different perspective. But yeah, the person who works closest with you and can describe you and explain what you can do, I would recommend just trying to identify who that best person is. Again, in the context of a chartered chemist application, we always ask our applicants if it's better to provide one good piece of evidence than multiple that aren't as strong. And if nothing else, the assessors are volunteers, and you don't want to make any extra work for them. It's actually, if you can give them everything they need through one piece of evidence or contact one corroborator, I'm sure they will look more favourably upon that.
I'm sure they would. And of course, that's evidence of your communication skills and your organisational skills too. So yes, I think that's good advice. Okay, we have another question here. If your experience is spread over 2 companies, with a gap year, when I was not in a strategic position, but less in general. Can you discuss? No,
hold on.
Hang on.
We're having a few technical difficulties here with reading the question.
I think the first one is, if your experience is spread over 2 companies with a gap year, how would you cope with that?
Hold on, let me make sure I'm answering the right question. If your experience is spread over 2 companies with a gap year, I've lost all control now. Sorry everyone for this.
We seem to have several questions that have all come in at the same time, and they're all in the same part of our control panel here. I think we get what you're meaning. If your experience is spread over 2 companies with a gap year, how could you put your submission together, I guess is what the question is.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as I mentioned on the submission page, section 2, we recommend honing in on 1 or 2 examples. So there's no reason why they couldn't be over more than one organisation. But again, it's always best to use as recent and relevant information as possible, because that's probably when you've been working at your most competent, shall we say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got another one. For the fellow category, I assume, would having more years in a strategic position but less in a general management position still count?
I couldn't answer that. That is something that the Chartered Manager Institute would have to answer directly. If I move the slide on, actually, I do have. So there's contact details there, both for our scheme, but also for the CMI directly, and they would be able to give you guidance on that. Their criteria usually says 10 years as managing plus 3 years at a strategic director level or giving strategic direction. So you may want to contact them to have clear guidance on whether that is suitable if you have less overall management experience. Okay. I know they're generally happy to go into the detail with people who get in touch. So there's an email there, cmgr@managers.org.uk, and a telephone number, UK 01536 207 429.
I guess it would be good to have a look at the CMI's website anyway to see more information, about the services that they offer. They're a good organisation, so find out what else they could do for you. Okay, so another question: does the person who corroborates your application have to hold chartered status?
They do not, no. So, as I mentioned again, we recommend that it is your line manager, the person who is most suited to articulate your skills, your experience, your knowledge, etc. So no, they do not need to be chartered. We recommend the person that is closest, who works most closely with you.
Okay, and another one: can someone who is a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute and also a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry, MRSC, apply for Chartered Manager?
Yeah, so yes, you can apply through this scheme. You will possibly have an alternative option available to you that might be more cost effective if you're already a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute. Again, if you go to the Chartered Manager Chartered pages, you'll be able to see the other options, which are their exempt route, qualified route, and experiential route. So yeah, there might be a more cost effective option for you, but certainly you can do it via this route.
Okay, another question. What happens when you have had 1 year's maternity leave? How would this affect your application process?
So For the purpose of this, I would recommend that you maintain contact with the CMI throughout the process. Normally, you have a 12-month registration period. So the CMI usually recommends that you, as you're submitting your initial registration, that you're at a point where you're more or less ready to begin your submission, but you do have a 12-month grace period. So there's that side of it. I would communicate with the CMI that you have this situation, that you, and I'm assuming this is someone who's already had their maternity leave, but again, would be relevant if it's someone who's about to go on maternity leave. Communicate with the CMI that this is your situation, and they can make allowances to ensure that you have what you need and any further guidance you might require as part of that.
Okay, we've had someone asking if we're going to put up all the links to this, so I guess the links are probably on the screen now.
The links are on the screen now. We'll put that onto the YouTube pages. Get it on the rse.li/CMgr, or if you just type Chartered Manager into the rse.org website, you can find it there as well.
Okay, there's a few more questions here. For example, I know you've mentioned this before, Gareth, but I know this does worry people. What happens if you don't actually directly manage people? You know, how do you provide that sort of evidence?
Yeah, so I think this is a common barrier for a lot of people. I don't manage people, so can I apply? Yes, you can. The CMI recognises people who not only are individuals not only leading people, but they might, or directly leading people, but might be influencing via project work, matrix collaborations, cross-functional teams, people who have managed change or process changes. All of those can be reflected, and it's just articulating those skills in section 3 and 4, as I mentioned before, how you lead, how you manage. It might be that if you are not directly managing people, you're more reliant on influencing and negotiating, but it's demonstrating those. But certainly you do not need to manage people to be able to apply for the award.
That's great, isn't it? Because I mean, you know, organisations are so much more flat. We could have people here who are working in consultancy roles who don't directly manage anybody, you know, but nonetheless they're showing a huge level of leadership and management, aren't they? Okay, how about this one? When we're talking about the submission, Gareth, is there a word count?
There's not a word count, but as I mentioned a moment ago, the assessors are volunteers. So the template's around 4 pages, and there is guidance within each section. So what the CMI recommends is replace that text with what you've done, and the whole document should be around 8 to 10 pages long. As I say, shouldn't be a dissertation. It should have clarity, it should be precise, but make sure you do take the opportunity to say what you want to say. But no word count.
Okay, that's great. Another one that's come in that asks, can you discuss the level 5 management certificate? Is there anything else required for this?
Again, not an area that I can talk with any great deal of authority on. I do know that would be another way of meeting the qualified route for the process. But again, contact the Chartered Management Institute directly, and they'd be able to give you guidance on that. And I apologise that we can't give you any clear answer on that today.
Okay, that's fine. And now here's an important one. If a submission is rejected, would you be able to resubmit? What's the process for that, Gary?
Yeah, so as I touched upon in both routes, there's an assessor review after your initial submission, and they work with you to fill in the gaps, to give any detail that they think might be missing. They're in an advisory capacity at that stage to get your submission to its strongest format. And even after that, during the assessment, they're looking to draw out detail. And as a result, they can then be specific in their feedback if they do feel there's more information needed. So yes, it can be, but I think, and again, this is similar to Chartered Chemist, through working with your assessor and through the CMI directly, generally we try and make sure that there are submissions at the stage that they are very strong before they reach the assessment process.
Okay, but it's not the end of the road. Right, okay, that's fine. And also, there's another interesting question here. Are the assessors relevant to the level that you hold in your organisation?
So no, they don't specifically, the Chartered Management Institute don't specifically look to pair any assessors. Typically, their assessors have a background in training or in assessing in some way, but all of them have held senior roles within business, so they do have an understanding of that application in practical skill, in a practical sense. But no, they don't pair you with a similar level or necessarily in a similar sector either. So again, it goes back to what we were saying about that introduction. You need to put down exactly what you want your assessor to know, because they won't know you. They won't necessarily know what your role is or what your background is. And you need to make sure they have an understanding of how you operate in the context of your organisation.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. That's really helpful. Well, we haven't had any more questions that have come in, so I hope that's given you a broad view of what Chartered Manager could do for you. I mean, it's a demonstration of your skills, and we've said you never know when these sorts of things are going to be helpful in your career. I mentioned consultants earlier. If you're thinking about being self-employed at any point or becoming a consultant, having charter marks, as part of your business pitch, if you like, is very helpful to you. It does help you if you want to change jobs or to move your career forward, because it says something about you without you having to say anything else. These are all professional awards and very valuable. I think it's great that we've got this link between the Royal Society of Chemistry and the Chartered Management Institute. Gareth said right at the very beginning, and I'm going to pick this up, that you can be an absolutely excellent chemist, you can be a fantastic chemist, but the skills are not necessarily the same as being a manager. And we know that if you want to progress your career, some people will really want to take the management route. It'll be something that they see as an aspiration. But I think it's fair to say that other people have management thrust upon them, don't they, Gareth? Yeah, yes, exactly. Absolutely. And I think if you fall into either of those categories, this is really worth looking at. I would say there's also an awful lot of support from our team. That's the careers team at the RSC. So if you're thinking about any of this or thinking about your career in general, we have lots of services that you can access. We've got information online on the website, and you can also contact us by email. So I would say we are careers@rsc.org. It's as simple as that. If you're thinking about your own career progression in any way after listening to this webinar, or for any other reason for that matter, and you're a member, please don't hesitate to get in touch. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Any final remarks from you, Gareth?
I'll just put my email out there as well, because I've realised I've not put it on the screen. If you do want to speak to me directly about anything I've talked about today, I'm Gareth Davis. That's DAVIESG @rsc.org. DAVIESG@rsc.org. Get in touch with anything or anything more broadly related to your membership as well. I'm always happy to help.
Thanks, Gareth. And I would just repeat the careers email. That's careers@rsc.org, and that will come through to the careers team. So we'll look forward to hearing from you if you've got any queries. Okay, well, it just remains for me to say thank you all for listening, and also to thank Gareth very much as well. Would you like to say thank you to everyone for listening too?
Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, all.
Okay, and we wish you, of course, we both wish you all the very best in your own career progression. So goodbye for now.